Blood pooled on the snow beneath Evelyn Hart's broken body as her car burned 20 feet away, flames licking the Montana darkness. 7 months pregnant and dying on a frozen highway, she discovered her boyfriend's betrayal just hours before, texts revealing months of lies, his cold denial of their child, his cruelty as he threw her into the storm with nothing. Now the blizzard was claiming what Dylan Carter had already destroyed. Her vision blurred. Her baby kicked weakly inside her. Then headlights cut through the white curtain of snow, and everything changed. This is the story of the night Evelyn Hart died, and the dangerous man who refused to let her go. If you stay until the end, hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The morning had started like any other lie. Evelyn Hart stood in the small kitchen of the apartment she'd shared with Dylan Carter for 2 years, her hand resting unconsciously on the 7-month swell of her belly as she scrambled eggs. February sunlight filtered weak and pale through the frost-edged windows of their Billings apartment, doing nothing to warm the chill she'd been feeling for weeks now. A chill that had nothing to do with the Montana winter. Dylan's phone buzzed on the counter between them. She shouldn't have looked. She knew that. But something in the way he lunged for it, the flash of panic across his face, made her hand move faster than her conscience. The screen lit up with a preview. "Can't wait to see you tonight." She still doesn't know, right? The sender's name was Ashley. The message included a heart emoji. Evelyn's fingers felt numb as she unlocked the phone. She knew his passcode, had known it for a year, had never once thought to use it. The eggs burned forgotten on the stove as she scrolled through months of messages, each one a knife sliding deeper between her ribs. "You promised you'd leave her. I'm not ready to be a father. You know that. The baby isn't even mine. She probably cheated. Once she has it, I'm done. I swear." "Evelyn," Dylan's voice cut through the roaring in her ears. "Put down the phone." She looked up at him, really looked at him for the first time in months. When had his eyes become so cold? When had that mouth she'd kissed 1,000 times learned to shape such casual cruelty? "The baby isn't yours." Her voice came out steady, which surprised her. Inside, something was fracturing, ice breaking over a frozen lake, the first terrible cracks before the fall. "You told her our daughter isn't yours?" Dylan had the decency to flinch, but only for a moment. Then his jaw set in that stubborn line she'd once found endearing, before she understood it meant he'd already made up his mind and nothing she said would matter. "I don't know if she is," he said flatly. "You could have been with anyone." The accusation hit her like a physical blow. 2 years. She'd been faithful for 2 years, had planned a life with this man, had rearranged her entire world to fit his dreams, while her own got smaller and smaller. She'd left college to support him through his mechanic certification. She'd worked double shifts at the diner to cover rent when he couldn't find steady work. She'd believed him every time he said things would get better. And now he stood in their kitchen, surrounded by the life she'd built for them, and called her a liar. "Get out," Dylan said, and the words were so unexpected that Evelyn actually laughed. A sharp, broken sound. "Excuse me?" "You heard me. This is my apartment. My name on the lease." He crossed his arms, and she saw it then, the relief in his eyes. He'd been waiting for this, wanting it. The pregnancy had been the trap he'd been looking to escape for months. "Pack your shit and get out. I want you gone before Ashley gets here tonight." The eggs were smoking now, filling the kitchen with the acrid smell of burned protein and shattered futures. Evelyn turned off the stove with mechanical precision, her body moving through shock while her mind tried desperately to catch up. "Dylan?" She hated how her voice shook. "I'm 7 months pregnant. It's February. Where exactly do you think I'm going to go?" "That's not my problem." He pulled out his wallet, counted out $300 bills, and dropped them on the counter like he was paying for a service he no longer required. "There. That should cover a motel until you figure something out. Call your family or something." Her family. Right. Her mother who'd cut her off 2 years ago when Evelyn moved in with Dylan without a ring. Her father, who'd made it clear she'd made her bed and could damn well lie in it. She had a younger sister in Seattle who sent Christmas cards, but nothing more. "I have nobody," Evelyn said quietly. "Not my problem," Dylan repeated, and she realized with sudden, crushing clarity that he didn't care, had maybe never cared. She'd been convenient, useful, someone to share rent and warm his bed, and now that she came with complications, he was cutting her loose like dead weight. The baby kicked inside her, strong, insistent, utterly unaware that her father had just denied her existence. Evelyn picked up the money with shaking hands. "You're really doing this." "We're done, Ev. We've been done for months. You just didn't want to see it." Dylan checked his watch, already dismissing her. "Ashley's coming at 6. I'd appreciate it if you weren't here." Something hardened in Evelyn's chest then, something that felt like the last warm part of her freezing solid. She walked to the bedroom they'd shared and began throwing clothes into the 2 suitcases she'd brought when she moved in. Everything she owned fit easily. She'd never accumulated much, had never felt settled enough to build a real life here. 20 minutes later, she stood in the doorway with her bags, looking at the man she'd loved, or thought she loved, or had convinced herself she loved, because the alternative was admitting she'd wasted 2 years on someone who couldn't even pretend to care now that things were hard. "I hope she's worth it," Evelyn said. Dylan didn't even look up from his phone. "Lock the door on your way out." The February air hit her like a slap when she stepped outside, cutting through her coat straight to her bones. Her 2008 Honda Civic sat in the parking lot, covered in a week's worth of snow. The check engine light had been on for 3 months. The heat barely worked. But it was hers, paid off last year with money she'd saved from her wages at the Highway Star Diner. She threw her suitcases in the trunk and sat in the driver's seat, her breath fogging in the frigid air while the engine struggled to turn over. The baby kicked again, and Evelyn pressed both hands to her belly. "It's okay," she whispered. "We're going to be okay." But she had no idea how. $300 wouldn't last long. She had maybe $800 in her checking account, money she'd been saving for the baby, for diapers and clothes, and all the things a newborn would need. The diner had let her go last week when she could no longer handle the long shifts on her feet, promising to call her when she was ready to come back after the baby was born. Ready to come back. Like she'd have childcare. Like she'd have anywhere to leave an infant while she worked 10-hour shifts for minimum wage plus tips. The panic started as a flutter in her chest, then grew, expanding until it felt like her ribs were cracking under the pressure. She gripped the steering wheel and forced herself to breathe, slow and steady, the way the free pregnancy clinic had taught her. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. The panic receded slightly, enough for her to think. She needed a plan. Her phone rang. For one wild moment, she thought it might be Dylan calling to apologize, to say he'd made a terrible mistake, to beg her to come back. But the screen showed an unknown number. "Hello? Is this Evelyn Hart?" A woman's voice, professional, slightly concerned. "Yes?" "This is Sarah Chen from Mountain View Medical Center. I'm calling about your appointment next week for your 30-week ultrasound. We need to reschedule due to Dr. Patterson being out of town. Would Thursday work instead of Tuesday?" The appointment, right. Another thing she'd have to figure out how to pay for without Dylan's insurance. She'd been on his policy through his job at the auto shop, but that was gone now too, wasn't it? "Can I call you back?" Evelyn heard herself say. "I need to check my schedule." She hung up before the woman could respond, then sat staring at the snow-covered windshield, reality settling over her like a weight. She had no job, no home, no insurance, no family willing to help, and a baby due in 10 weeks. The smart thing would be to drive to the women's shelter downtown, to ask for help, to swallow her pride and admit she couldn't do this alone. But something in Evelyn recoiled from that idea, from the thought of sleeping in a crowded room with strangers, of telling her story over and over to counselors and social workers, of becoming a statistic, a cautionary tale. She'd figure something out. She always did. Except this time, as she started driving with no destination in mind, no plan beyond getting away from the apartment, and the man who'd thrown her away like garbage, Evelyn couldn't think of a single option that didn't end in disaster. The snow started falling around noon. By 2 o'clock, it was a full blizzard. Evelyn had been driving south on Highway 212, heading vaguely toward the small town of Cook City, where she'd once waitressed for a summer during college. Maybe someone there would remember her, would have a lead on work, or at least a couch to sleep on for a few nights. It was a desperate plan, the kind born of panic and shock, and she realized too late how stupid it was to drive into the mountains during a snowstorm. But by then, turning back meant facing Dylan again, meant admitting defeat, and something stubborn in Evelyn refused to do that. She kept driving, her windshield wipers struggling against the heavy snow, visibility dropping to almost nothing. The highway wound through the mountains, a narrow ribbon of asphalt that normally felt adventurous and beautiful. Now it felt like a trap, sheer rock walls on one side and steep drops on the other, nothing but white emptiness in every direction. She should have stopped at the last town, should have found a motel, used some of Dylan's guilt money to wait out the storm. But the rage was still burning in her chest, hot and bitter, and she wanted to put as many miles as possible between herself and the life that had just imploded. The deer appeared without warning. One moment the road was empty, the next, a massive buck stood directly in her path, eyes reflecting her headlights, frozen in that terrible moment of animal indecision. Evelyn slammed on the brakes. The car started to spin. She'd grown up in Montana, had driven in snow her entire life, knew the rules. Don't overcorrect, turn into the skid, stay calm. But knowledge and instinct were different things, and her body betrayed her, wrenching the wheel hard to the right as the tires found a patch of black ice and lost all traction. The world became a nauseating blur of white and gray and darkness. She felt the horrible moment when the car left the road, the weightless instant before gravity took over, then impact. The Civic rolled once, twice, metal screaming as it tumbled down the steep embankment. The airbag exploded into Evelyn's face, the seatbelt cutting across her chest and belly. Glass shattered. Something hit her head hard enough that her vision sparked with stars. When the car finally stopped moving, she was upside down, held in place by her seatbelt, the roof of the Civic crushed against the snow. For a long moment, Evelyn couldn't do anything but breathe, each inhalation sending sharp pains through her ribs. Blood ran down her forehead into her eyes. Her left arm hung at a wrong angle. The baby. Terror cleared her mind like cold water. She pressed her right hand to her belly, feeling desperately for movement. A kick, weak but there. "Thank God," Evelyn whispered, then started crying because what did it matter if the baby was okay right now? They were trapped in a wrecked car in a blizzard, miles from any help, and she could smell gasoline. Gasoline. The smell galvanized her into action. She fumbled with the seatbelt release, fell hard onto the crushed roof when it finally gave way, and began kicking at the driver's side window. The safety glass was already cracked from the crash. 3 good kicks, and it shattered. Evelyn dragged herself through the opening, broken glass cutting through her coat and jeans, blood mixing with snow as she crawled away from the car on her hands and knees. She'd made it maybe 20 feet when the Civic caught fire. The flames were small at first, just a flicker near the engine. Then the gas tank went up with a whoosh that threw heat across her back even from this distance. Evelyn collapsed in the snow and watched her car burn, watched the last piece of her old life turn to smoke and ash in the Montana wilderness. The cold started to seep in quickly after that. She was bleeding from at least 3 places she could identify: her head, her left arm, and somewhere on her right leg. Her coat was soaked through. The snow was falling so hard now that she could barely see the burning car 15 feet away. She needed to get to the road, flag down help. But when she tried to stand, her left leg buckled and she went down hard, pain shooting through her ankle like electricity. The crawl up the embankment took everything she had. Her good hand dug into snow and frozen earth, her feet scrabbling for purchase on the steep slope. She couldn't feel her fingers anymore. The baby had stopped kicking, and Evelyn didn't know if that was normal or terrible. She didn't know anything except that she had to keep moving. By the time she reached the highway, she couldn't remember why she was climbing. The world had narrowed to the next pull forward, the next few inches gained. She collapsed on the shoulder of the road, her cheek pressed against asphalt hidden under 6 inches of snow. The storm howled around her. Somewhere in the distance, her car burned itself out. Evelyn's eyes started to close. This was how she died, she thought with strange clarity. Alone on a highway in a blizzard, pregnant and broken, with nobody to even know she was missing. Dylan wouldn't report her gone. Her family wouldn't notice. The diner wouldn't wonder. She'd disappear into the snow like she'd never existed at all. The baby kicked once more, a flutter so faint she might have imagined it. "I'm sorry," Evelyn whispered. "I'm so sorry." Then she let the cold take her. She didn't hear the vehicle approaching, didn't see the headlights cutting through the blizzard, didn't know that her life was about to change in ways she couldn't possibly imagine. All she knew was darkness and cold and the terrible certainty that she'd failed before she'd even had a chance to begin. The last thing Evelyn Hart felt before consciousness left her completely was someone lifting her from the snow, strong arms cradling her like she weighed nothing, a voice speaking in rapid Italian to someone she couldn't see, then nothing. When awareness returned, it came in fragments, warmth, blessed, incredible warmth, softness beneath her, a bed, clean sheets, pain but distant now, muffled by something pharmaceutical. Evelyn opened her eyes slowly, expecting to see the harsh fluorescent lights of a hospital room. Instead, she found herself in what looked like a bedroom from a luxury hotel, all dark wood and cream-colored walls, heavy curtains drawn against windows that showed only darkness and falling snow. An IV line ran into her right arm. Her left arm was splinted and bandaged. More bandages wrapped her head and her right leg. She was wearing a nightgown she didn't recognize, soft cotton that definitely wasn't hers. Where the hell was she? The door opened and a woman entered, 60-something, gray hair pulled into a neat bun, wearing scrubs and carrying a medical bag. "Ah, you're awake." The woman had a slight accent Evelyn couldn't place. European, maybe. "How do you feel?" "Where am I?" Evelyn's voice came out as a croak. "What happened?" "You were in a car accident. Mr. Rossi found you on Highway 212 and brought you here rather than trying to reach the hospital in this storm." The woman, doctor, nurse, pulled out a blood pressure cuff. "I'm Dr. Castellano. I've been monitoring you and the baby. Your vitals are stable now." "The baby?" Evelyn's good hand flew to her stomach. "Is she Heartbeat is strong. No signs of placental abruption. You are very lucky, Miss Hart." Dr. Castellano wrapped the cuff around her arm. "Though you have a mild concussion, fractured ulna, sprained ankle, and various lacerations that required stitches. You'll be sore for several weeks, but you should make a full recovery." Evelyn tried to process this information, but her mind snagged on something earlier. "Mr. Rossi? Who's that?" "The man who pulled you from the snow." The doctor pumped the cuff, watching the gauge. "Lorenzo Rossi. This is his estate." Estate. The word conjured images of sprawling properties and old money, neither of which fit with Evelyn's understanding of her current situation. "I need to go to a hospital," she said. "I can't afford— this is very kind, but I should— The roads are impassable. They won't clear Highway 212 until the storm passes, likely not for another day or two." Dr. Castellano released the cuff, apparently satisfied with whatever she'd found. "Mr. Rossi insisted you stay here until it's safe to travel. He's very particular about repaying debts." "Debts? I don't owe him anything. He believes he owes you." The doctor began checking the IV line. "He was returning from a business meeting when he saw your car burning. He found you on the highway barely conscious, if he'd been even 5 minutes later." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Evelyn had a sudden flash of memory, strong arms, a voice speaking Italian, the smell of expensive cologne mixing with smoke and snow. "I want to thank him," she said. "He'll visit when you're stronger. For now, you need rest." Dr. Castellano adjusted the IV drip slightly. "This is for pain and to prevent infection. Try to sleep. I'll check on you in a few hours." After the doctor left, Evelyn lay in the impossibly soft bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of her new reality. 12 hours ago, she'd had an apartment, a boyfriend, a plan for her future. Now she had nothing except her life and the baby still growing inside her, saved by a stranger named Lorenzo Rossi, who apparently lived on an estate and thought he owed her a debt. Outside, the storm continued to rage. And somewhere in this house, the man who'd pulled her from death was waiting. Evelyn closed her eyes and tried not to think about what would happen when the storm finally passed, and she had to face the world again. Homeless, jobless, broken, and alone. But for now, for this moment, she was warm and safe and alive. It would have to be enough. Evelyn woke to pale morning light filtering through the heavy curtains and the sound of voices speaking Italian in the hallway outside her room. The pain had receded to a dull throb, manageable now that whatever was in the IV had done its work through the night. She shifted carefully in the bed, testing her injuries. Her left arm ached beneath the splint. Her ankle protested when she flexed it. But the baby was moving, those small flutters of life that had become her constant companion over the past months. Still alive. Both of them still alive. The door opened and Dr. Castellano entered, followed by a woman who looked to be in her early 30s, elegant in dark slacks and a cream sweater, her black hair pulled into a sleek ponytail. "Good morning," the doctor said, already reaching for the blood pressure cuff. "This is Isabella Rossi, Lorenzo's sister." Isabella moved to the side of the bed with the kind of graceful confidence that came from growing up with money. But her smile seemed genuine, her dark eyes warm with concern. "I'm so glad you're awake," Isabella said, her accent similar to the doctor's but softer, more Americanized. "You gave us quite a scare last night. How are you feeling?" "Confused, mostly." Evelyn tried to sit up and immediately regretted it as pain shot through her ribs. "I still don't understand where I am or why your brother brought me here instead of a hospital." "The storm made the hospital unreachable," Dr. Castellano said, wrapping the cuff around Evelyn's arm. "And Lorenzo doesn't like leaving debts unpaid. He found you dying in the snow. That creates an obligation." There was that word again, obligation, as if saving someone's life was a transaction that required balancing. "Well, thank you," Evelyn said, feeling the inadequacy of the words. "I mean it. I thought I was going to die out there." "You would have," Isabella said bluntly. "Dr. Castellano said another 10 minutes and you would have been gone. You and the baby both." She glanced at Evelyn's belly, visible beneath the thin nightgown. "When are you due?" 10 weeks, give or take." The familiar anxiety started creeping back in. 10 weeks until she had a newborn and no plan, no home, no way to support either of them. "I should probably figure out where I'm going once the road's clear." Something flickered in Isabella's expression, recognition, maybe, or understanding. "Do you have family nearby?" "No." The word came out harsher than Evelyn intended. "I don't have anyone." Dr. Castellano finished checking her vitals in silence, making notes on a tablet. "Blood pressure is good, temperature normal. I want you on bed rest for at least another 48 hours, then we'll reassess. The fracture will need 6 weeks to heal properly, and that ankle needs to stay elevated and iced." "I can't stay here for 6 weeks," Evelyn protested. "I appreciate everything you've done, but I need to—" "Where exactly do you need to be?" Isabella interrupted gently. "Forgive me for being direct, but Dr. Castellano mentioned you were driving alone in a blizzard, 7 months pregnant, with everything you owned in your car. That doesn't suggest you have somewhere urgent to return to." The observation hit too close to home. Evelyn felt heat rise in her cheeks, shame mixing with anger at being so transparent, so obviously desperate. That's none of your business, she said. You're right. It's not. Isabella sat in the chair beside the bed, crossing her legs. But my brother made it his business when he pulled you from that highway. And Lorenzo takes his responsibilities very seriously. You're under his protection now, whether you asked for it or not. I don't need protection. I need... Evelyn stopped. Because what did she need? A job she couldn't work with a broken arm and sprained ankle. An apartment she couldn't afford. A future she couldn't imagine. You need time to heal, Dr. Castellano said firmly. And you need to keep that baby safe. The stress you're under isn't good for either of you. Your cortisol levels are elevated, your blood pressure was borderline when you arrived, and you've lost weight you can't afford to lose. I'm fine, Evelyn said automatically. You're not fine. You're exhausted and injured and alone. The doctor's voice softened slightly. Let us help you, at least until you're strong enough to make decisions from a place of health instead of desperation. The kindness in her words made something crack in Evelyn's chest. She'd been so focused on being strong, on not breaking down, on proving she could handle everything Dylan had thrown at her. But sitting in this stranger's house, her body broken and her future non-existent, she couldn't maintain the facade anymore. I lost everything yesterday, she heard herself say. My boyfriend kicked me out because he decided the baby isn't his, which is insane because I've never been with anyone else. But he's been cheating for months and apparently telling his mistress that I'm a liar. And he wants nothing to do with us. The words came faster now, 2 years of frustration pouring out. I have $800 and no job and no family who'll help. And I was stupid enough to drive into the mountains during a blizzard because I couldn't stand to be in that town anymore, knowing he was there with her, living the life I thought we were building together. She was crying now, hot tears of rage and grief sliding down her face. So no, I don't have anywhere urgent to be. I don't have anywhere to be at all. Silence filled the room after her outburst. Doctor. Castellano busied herself with the fourth line, her face carefully neutral. But Isabella reached out and took Evelyn's good hand, squeezing gently. Then stay here, she said simply. Heal, rest. Figure out your next move when you're stronger. I can't afford... Lorenzo doesn't want your money. He wants the debt settled. You let him help you. The debt gets settled. Everyone's happy. It doesn't work like that, Evelyn protested weakly. In my brother's world, it does. Isabella stood, smoothing her slacks. I run translation services for several of Lorenzo's business partners. International contracts, mainly Italian to English and vice versa. I could use help if you're interested. It would give you something to do while you recover, and the work can be done from bed until your ankle heals. I don't speak Italian. But you speak English natively, yes? And you can type with one hand? Isabella smiled. I need someone to review the English translations for naturalness. Make sure the phrasing sounds American rather than European. It's not glamorous, but it pays well, and you can work at your own pace. It was charity dressed up as opportunity, and they both knew it. But Evelyn was too tired and too desperate to refuse. Okay, she said quietly. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. I'm a demanding boss. Isabella headed for the door, then paused. Lorenzo will want to meet you properly once you're feeling better. Try not to judge him too harshly. He can be intense. After they left, Evelyn lay in the too-soft bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to process the strange turn her life had taken. 24 hours ago, she'd been freezing to death on a highway. Now she was in a mansion, being offered work by the sister of the man who'd saved her life, surrounded by people who spoke Italian and talked about debts and obligations like they were currency. The whole situation felt surreal, like she'd stepped into someone else's story. But the pain in her arm was real. The baby moving inside her was real, and for the moment, she was safe and warm and being cared for. Whatever came next, she'd figure it out. She always did. The storm broke that afternoon, leaving the world outside blanketed in 3 feet of fresh snow. Through her window, Evelyn could see manicured grounds stretching into pine forest, everything draped in white like a Christmas card. In the distance, mountains rose sharp against a sky finally gone clear and blue. The estate was beautiful, isolated, and from what she could see, heavily secured. She'd noticed the cameras in the hallways when Dr. Castellano had helped her hobble to the bathroom. Noticed the men in dark suits standing at intervals throughout the house, speaking quietly into phones or radios. Noticed the way Isabella's smile never quite reached her eyes when she talked about Lorenzo's business partners. This wasn't just a wealthy man's home. This was something else entirely. Evelyn was contemplating this realization when someone knocked on her door. "Come in," she called, expecting Dr. Castellano or maybe Isabella returning with the translation work. Instead, a man entered who could only be Lorenzo Rossi. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with the kind of presence that made the room feel smaller just by his being in it. Dark hair, dark eyes, a face that would have been handsome if not for the hardness around his mouth and the scar cutting through his left eyebrow. He wore dark slacks and a charcoal sweater that probably cost more than Evelyn had made in a month at the diner, but it was his eyes that caught her, sharp and assessing, taking in every detail of her injuries, the IV line, the way she'd instinctively pulled the blanket higher when he entered. "Miss Hart." His voice was deep, accent present but controlled. "I apologize for the intrusion. I wanted to see for myself that you were recovering." "You're Lorenzo." It wasn't a question. "I am." He stayed near the door, not approaching the bed, like he knew his presence was intimidating and was trying to minimize it. "How are you feeling?" "Like I got hit by a truck, but alive thanks to you." Evelyn met his gaze directly, refusing to be cowed. "They said you pulled me from the snow, that I would have died if you hadn't stopped." "Anyone would have stopped." "I don't think that's true, but I'm grateful anyway." Lorenzo nodded once, a sharp motion. "Dr. Castellano says you'll make a full recovery, and the baby is unharmed." "Yes." She put her hand on her belly protectively. "We got lucky." "Luck had nothing to do with it. You survived because you're strong." He said it like he was stating a fact, not offering a compliment. "Isabella mentioned she offered you translation work." "She did." I said yes. "Good. She needs the help, though she'd never admit it." Lorenzo moved slightly closer, and Evelyn noticed he walked with the controlled grace of someone trained in violence. "I want to be clear about something, Miss Hart. You're safe here. Whatever you're running from, whoever hurt you, they can't reach you on this property. You have my word." The statement was both comforting and deeply unsettling. How did he know she was running, and what kind of man casually promised protection like it was something he had the power to guarantee? "I'm not running from anyone," Evelyn said carefully. "I was just driving. Bad timing with the storm." "Of course." But his eyes said he didn't believe her, and moreover, that it didn't matter. "The roads will be clear by tomorrow. If you wish to leave then, I'll have someone drive you wherever you need to go. But you're welcome to stay as long as necessary. This house is large and mostly empty. Your presence is no inconvenience." It was the strangest invitation Evelyn had ever received. Formal, almost courtly, and completely at odds with the dangerous energy she could feel radiating from him. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "And don't say obligation. Nobody goes to this much trouble over obligation." Lorenzo was quiet for a long moment, his gaze drifting to the window and the snow-covered grounds beyond. "My grandfather came to America with nothing," he finally said. "No money, no English, no prospects. He was desperate and alone in a country that didn't want him. Someone helped him anyway, gave him work, a place to stay, a chance to build something. He never forgot that kindness." Lorenzo looked back at her. "I saw you lying in the snow, pregnant and bleeding, and I thought of him, of how easily you could have been forgotten, left to disappear like you never existed. I couldn't let that happen." The raw honesty in his words surprised her. This was a man who guarded himself carefully, she could tell, but for some reason he was choosing to be honest with her. Your grandfather sounds like a good man, Evelyn said softly. He was a complicated man, but yes, in his way he was good. Lorenzo moved toward the door. Rest, Miss Hart. Heal. Everything else can wait. It's Evelyn, she said impulsively. You pulled me from the snow. You should probably call me by my first name. The corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. Evelyn, then. And you may call me Lorenzo, though most people around here prefer Mr. Rossi. Are you always so formal? Only with people I'm trying not to frighten. This time he did smile, brief and sharp. I'm told I can be intimidating. You are, Evelyn admitted, but I've dealt with intimidating men before. They don't scare me anymore. Something shifted in Lorenzo's expression. Approval, maybe, or respect. No, I don't imagine they do. Sleep well, Evelyn. He left as quietly as he'd arrived, and Evelyn was left alone with her racing thoughts and the strange certainty that her life had just changed in ways she couldn't begin to predict. Over the next 3 days, the Rossi estate revealed itself to Evelyn in pieces. Dr. Castellano visited twice daily, monitoring her recovery with clinical efficiency. The fracture was healing well. The ankle needed another week of elevation. The baby's heartbeat remained strong. Isabella brought her the translation work as promised, contracts and business correspondence that needed to sound natural in English. The pay was generous, almost suspiciously so, but Evelyn was too grateful for the distraction to question it. She worked from bed, her laptop balanced on her knees, redlining awkward phrases and suggesting better alternatives. The documents were mostly mundane: real estate deals, shipping manifests, import-export agreements. Nothing obviously illegal, but nothing that explained the armed men or the security cameras or the way Isabella sometimes looked over her shoulder before speaking. On the 4th day, Evelyn was finally allowed to leave her room. Isabella helped her down the stairs, moving slowly to accommodate the ankle wrapped in an elastic bandage. The house was even more impressive from the inside. High ceilings, marble floors, artwork that looked original and expensive. Everything tasteful and refined and utterly impersonal. How long has Lorenzo lived here? Evelyn asked as they made their way to what Isabella called the sunroom. He bought the estate 5 years ago, after our grandfather died and left Lorenzo the business. Isabella's voice was carefully neutral. He needed something more private than the house we grew up in, somewhere he could conduct meetings without neighbors asking questions. What kind of business requires that much privacy? Isabella didn't answer immediately. They'd reached the sunroom, a glass-walled space filled with plants and comfortable furniture. She helped Evelyn settle onto a sofa positioned to catch the afternoon light. Our grandfather started an import company after he arrived from Sicily, Isabella finally said. Lorenzo expanded it significantly. He has diverse interests. It was the most diplomatic non-answer Evelyn had ever heard. You're lying to me, she said flatly, or at least not telling me the whole truth. Would you believe me if I said I was protecting you? No. Evelyn adjusted her splinted arm, finding a comfortable position. I'm not stupid, Isabella. I know what this looks like. The guards, the security, the way everyone here defers to Lorenzo like he's royalty. This isn't just a successful import business. Isabella sighed, sinking into the chair across from her. You're right. It's not just imports, but it's also not my story to tell. If you want the truth, you need to ask Lorenzo directly. And will he tell me? I don't know. He's very private about certain things, but he respects directness. If you ask, he'll either answer honestly or tell you he can't. He won't lie to you. It was something, at least, more than Dylan had ever given her. All those months of lies and excuses and half-truths while he was building a completely separate life with Ashley. I'll ask him then, Evelyn decided. As if summoned by her words, Lorenzo appeared in the doorway. He'd clearly just come from outside. His coat was dusted with snow, his cheeks slightly flushed from the cold. Isabella, Marco called. He wants to move the Thursday meeting to Wednesday. His eyes found Evelyn. You're out of bed. That's progress. Dr. Castellano cleared me for limited movement, Evelyn said, as long as I keep the ankle elevated and don't try to run any marathons. I'll leave you two to talk, Isabella said, standing. I need to review those shipping manifests before the call with Milan anyway. She left before Evelyn could protest, and suddenly it was just her and Lorenzo in the sunroom, weak winter sunlight streaming through the glass. May I sit? Lorenzo asked, gesturing to the chair Isabella had vacated. It's your house. It's your space for the moment. I don't enter where I'm not welcome. He waited until she nodded before settling into the chair with that same controlled grace she'd noticed before. You wanted to ask me something. I can see it in your face. Evelyn had planned to build up to the question, to be diplomatic, but something about Lorenzo's directness made her match it. What do you really do? She asked. And don't tell me imports. I want the truth. Lorenzo studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Why do you want to know? Because I'm living in your house, taking your charity, working for your sister. I think I have a right to understand what I'm accepting help from. Fair enough? Lorenzo leaned back, his hands resting on the arms of the chair. My grandfather came to America in 1953. He was 18 years old, fleeing a war-torn Sicily with nothing but the clothes on his back. The legitimate businesses wouldn't hire Italians back then. So he found work where he could, docks, warehouses, places that didn't ask questions. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Eventually, he started his own operation. Nothing violent, nothing that hurt innocent people. He moved goods that other people wanted moved. He provided services that were in demand. He helped the Italian community when nobody else would. And he built something that gave his children and grandchildren opportunities he never had. You're talking about organized crime, Evelyn said quietly. I'm talking about survival in a world that didn't want us. Lorenzo's voice remained calm, factual. My grandfather created a network that protected our community, helped immigrants find work and housing, mediated disputes when the police wouldn't help. Yes, some of what he did existed in gray areas of the law. But he had principles. No drugs. No prostitution. No harm to civilians. Those rules still stand. Evelyn's heart was beating faster, but she forced herself to stay calm. And you run this network now. I inherited it, yes. I've spent the past 5 years trying to transition everything to legitimate business. The imports are real. We move art, wine, specialty foods from Europe. But there are still legacy operations that take time to unwind. And there are people who resist change. Like Marco Bellini, Evelyn said, remembering the name Isabella had mentioned earlier. Lorenzo's expression darkened. You've been paying attention. I'm a waitress. I'm good at picking up conversations I'm not supposed to hear. She met his gaze steadily. Who is he, like? Marco runs a competing organization, one that doesn't share my grandfather's principles. Lorenzo's jaw tightened. He's been trying to expand into our territory for months. Things have been tense. Tense like business competition tense, or tense like people might get hurt tense? Both. The simple honesty of the answer was almost worse than a lie would have been. Evelyn felt the baby kick inside her, a reminder of everything she had to protect. I should leave, she said. I appreciate everything you've done, but I can't put my baby in danger just because you're safer here than anywhere else, Lorenzo interrupted. Bellini doesn't know you exist. Nobody outside this house knows about you. As far as the world is concerned, you died in that car crash on Highway 212. The word sent ice down Evelyn's spine. What? Your car burned completely. By the time emergency services responded to reports of the fire, there was nothing left to identify. No body was recovered because we took you before anyone arrived. Lorenzo leaned forward, his voice urgent. I'm not trying to frighten you, Evelyn. I'm trying to make you understand. Right now you're invisible. Nobody is looking for you because nobody knows to look. That invisibility is the best protection I can offer. Dylan knows I left. He'll... Will he? From what Isabella gathered, he wanted you gone. Why would he report you missing? Lorenzo's eyes were sharp, seeing too much. And your family? Would they notice if you didn't call? The terrible truth was that nobody would notice. Dylan would assume she'd found somewhere to go. Her mother wouldn't expect contact. The diner would figure she'd moved on. She could disappear completely and nobody would care enough to question it. "This is insane," Evelyn whispered. "I should call someone. Let people know I'm alive." "You should do whatever makes you feel safe," Lorenzo said quietly. "But before you do, ask yourself this. Who would you call? Who would care? And would telling them change anything except making you visible again to people who clearly didn't value you when they could see you?" It was a brutal question, made worse by the fact that Evelyn had no good answer. "I need to think," she said. "Of course." Lorenzo stood. "Take all the time you need, but know this, Evelyn. You have a home here as long as you want it. No obligations, no expectations. Just a safe place to heal and figure out what comes next." He left her alone in the sunroom, surrounded by plants and winter light, her mind spinning with impossible choices. She could leave, find a women's shelter, apply for assistance, figure out how to survive as a single mother with nothing. Or she could stay in this strange, dangerous house with a man who'd built his fortune on the edges of the law, protected by the same invisibility that made her feel erased. Neither option was good, but one offered safety and time, while the other offered only uncertainty. Evelyn put her hand on her belly, feeling the baby move beneath her palm. "What do I do?" she whispered to her daughter. "What's the right choice?" The baby kicked again, strong and insistent, and somehow, impossibly, that felt like an answer. That evening, Isabella found her still in the sunroom, watching the sun set over the snow-covered mountains. "Lorenzo said you two talked," Isabella said, settling into the chair beside her. "I'm guessing he told you the truth." "Some version of it." "He wouldn't lie to you. Whatever else my brother is, he's honest about what he is." Isabella was quiet for a moment. "Are you going to leave?" Evelyn had been asking herself the same question all afternoon. The smart thing, the safe thing, would be to get as far away from the Rossi family as possible. But safe was relative when you had nothing and nowhere to go. "I don't know," she admitted. "This whole situation feels unreal. A week ago, I was working at a diner in Billings, planning a future with a man I thought loved me. Now I'm living with a crime boss who pulled me from the snow, and I'm supposed to just... what? Pretend this is normal?" "Nothing about the Rossi family is normal," Isabella said with a slight smile. "But Lorenzo meant what he said. You're safe here, and he's not what you think." "What am I supposed to think? He just told me he runs an organized crime network." "He told you he inherited one. There's a difference." Isabella turned to face her fully. "Lorenzo didn't want this life. He wanted to be an architect. Did you know that? He studied at Columbia, had a job lined up with a firm in New York. Then our grandfather had a stroke, and there was nobody else to take over. Our father died when we were young. Our uncle is useless." It fell to Lorenzo. Evelyn heard the pain beneath Isabella's words. "He gave up everything he wanted. He gave up everything to protect the people who depend on us, the families my grandfather helped, the businesses he supported, the community he built. They would have been destroyed if Lorenzo had walked away. So he didn't. He stepped into a world he hated, and he's been trying to make it better ever since. That doesn't change what it is." "No," Isabella agreed, "but it should change how you see him. He's not a monster, Evelyn. He's a man doing the best he can with the hand he was dealt." It was a generous interpretation, maybe too generous, but as Evelyn sat there watching darkness fall over the mountains, she thought about her own choices, her own compromises, the ways she'd bent herself to fit Dylan's life even when it hurt. Who was she to judge someone else for surviving? "I'll stay," she heard herself say. "For now, until I figure out what else to do." Isabella's smile was genuine this time, reaching her eyes. "Good. I'd hate to lose my best translator right when I'm getting her properly trained. They sat together in comfortable silence as the last light faded from the sky, and Evelyn tried not to think about how easily she was accepting a life she couldn't have imagined existing a week ago. But the baby was safe. She was warm and fed and healing. Sometimes that had to be enough. The days fell into a rhythm that felt both foreign and strangely comfortable. Evelyn worked on Isabella's translations in the mornings, her laptop propped against her knees while winter light streamed through the windows of what had become her room. Dr. Castellano visited every other day now, pleased with how the fracture was healing, how the baby continued to grow strong and healthy despite everything. In the afternoons, when her ankle allowed, Evelyn explored the estate. It was massive, 20 rooms at least, most of them empty or used for storage. The library held books in 3 languages. The kitchen was industrial-sized, staffed by a quiet woman named Maria, who insisted on feeding Evelyn constantly, muttering in Italian about pregnant women needing proper nutrition. And everywhere, the signs of Lorenzo's world. Men in dark suits speaking into phones. Security cameras in every hallway. Locked doors she was politely steered away from whenever she wandered too close. She saw Lorenzo only in passing during those first weeks. He was always leaving for meetings or returning from them, his face hard with whatever business consumed his days. But he asked after her recovery each time their paths crossed, his concern genuine if brief. "You're looking stronger," he said one morning, finding her in the library with a book she couldn't concentrate on. "The ankle's almost healed." "Doctor, Castellano says I can start putting full weight on it next week." Evelyn closed the book, marking her place with a finger. "I've been thinking I should start looking for somewhere more permanent. I've imposed on your hospitality long enough." Lorenzo's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. "You're not an imposition." "I can't stay here forever." "Why not?" He moved into the library, selecting a book from a high shelf with the ease of someone who knew the collection well. "This house has more space than I need. Isabella enjoys having another woman around, and you're earning your keep with the translation work. That's charity, and you know it. The work she gives me takes maybe 2 hours a day. Then consider it payment for keeping Isabella's spirits up. She's been happier since you arrived." Lorenzo turned to face her fully. "Besides, where would you go? You have no job, no home, a baby due in 8 weeks. The practical choice is to stay where you're safe and cared for until after the birth." It was the same logic Evelyn had been wrestling with for days. The same calculation that kept her here despite every instinct screaming that she should run. "And after the birth?" she asked quietly. "What happens then?" "Then you decide what you want. But you decide from a position of strength, not desperation." Before Evelyn could respond, one of Lorenzo's men appeared in the doorway, his face tense. "Boss, we have a situation. Marco's people hit the warehouse on 5th Street." The transformation in Lorenzo was instant. The thoughtful man discussing books became someone else entirely, hard, focused, dangerous. "When?" His voice was clipped, all business. 20 minutes ago. They torched the building and left a message." "Show me." Lorenzo strode from the library without another word, leaving Evelyn alone with her racing heart and the sudden sharp reminder of exactly what kind of world she'd stumbled into. That evening, Isabella found her in the sunroom, staring out at the darkness. "You heard about the warehouse," Isabella said. It wasn't a question. "One of Lorenzo's men came to get him. He looked worried. Marco is escalating. He's been pushing at our territory for months, testing our defenses." Isabella sat down heavily. "Lorenzo's been trying to avoid open conflict, but Marco interprets restraint as weakness." "What did the message say?" Isabella was quiet for a long moment. "It said that Lorenzo's going soft, that he's lost the stomach for what needs to be done, and that Marco is coming for everything we've built." Fear coiled in Evelyn's stomach. "Is he? Coming here, I mean?" "Not to the estate. Marco's vicious, but he's not stupid. This property is too well defended. Isabella's fingers drummed against the arm of her chair, a nervous gesture Evelyn had never seen from her before. But he'll keep hitting our businesses, our people, trying to provoke Lorenzo into making a mistake. What kind of mistake? The kind where someone dies and Lorenzo ends up in prison for it. Isabella met her eyes. That's Marco's goal. He can't beat Lorenzo in a straight fight, so he's trying to manipulate him into destroying himself. Evelyn thought about the man she'd come to know over the past weeks. Controlled, careful, always thinking 3 moves ahead. Lorenzo won't fall for that. I hope you're right. But Isabella's voice held doubt. He's been different since our grandfather died. More willing to walk away from fights, more focused on legitimacy. It's the right strategy long term, but in the short term, it makes us look weak. And weakness in this world is blood in the water. The conversation stayed with Evelyn through the night, making sleep impossible. She lay in bed listening to the house settle around her, wondering what Lorenzo was doing, whether he was safe, whether she'd made a terrible mistake staying in a place where warehouses got torched and messages were delivered through violence. But in the morning, Lorenzo was at breakfast as usual, dark circles under his eyes, the only sign of whatever he'd dealt with overnight. The warehouse on 5th, Evelyn said before she could stop herself. Was anyone hurt? Lorenzo looked up from his coffee, surprised. No. The building was empty. Marco made sure of that. He wants to provoke me, not commit murder. He paused. You're worried. Of course I'm worried. I'm living in your house while someone's trying to start a war with you. Marco won't touch you. He doesn't know you exist, remember? That's not what I'm worried about. The words came out sharper than she intended. I'm worried about you doing something stupid because some thug burned down a building. Lorenzo's expression softened slightly. I'm not going to do anything stupid. Promise me. Evelyn, promise me, she repeated, and was shocked to realize she meant it. Somewhere in the past weeks, Lorenzo Rossi had become more than just the man who'd saved her life. He'd become someone she cared about, someone whose safety mattered to her in ways she was still trying to understand. I promise, Lorenzo said quietly. I won't let Marco manipulate me into making a mistake that puts everyone at risk, including you. The moment stretched between them, heavy with things neither of them was ready to say. Then Isabella breezed in, shattering the tension with her usual efficiency. The Milan people are on the line about the shipping contracts, she announced. And Maria says if Evelyn doesn't eat more protein, she's going to start force-feeding her. The normalcy of the complaint made Evelyn laugh despite everything. Tell Maria I had eggs this morning. Not enough, apparently. She's making you a steak for lunch. Life continued its strange new rhythm. Evelyn's ankle healed enough that she could walk the estate grounds when the weather allowed, bundled in one of Isabella's spare coats, her breath fogging in the cold air. The baby was active now, kicking and rolling so much that some nights Evelyn couldn't sleep for the constant movement. Dr. Castellano said everything looked perfect. The fracture had healed cleanly. The pregnancy was progressing normally. Another 6 weeks and Evelyn would be holding her daughter. The thought terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. Have you thought about names? Isabella asked one afternoon. They were in the sunroom again, Evelyn's feet propped on an ottoman, while Isabella reviewed contracts on her tablet. A few, but nothing feels right yet. Evelyn rubbed her belly absently. I keep thinking I'll know when I meet her, that she'll look like someone specific and the name will just fit. That's how my mother chose my name. She said I came out looking fierce and Italian, so Isabella it was. Isabella smiled at the memory. Lorenzo was supposed to be named after our father, but grandfather took one look at him and declared he had the Rossi eyes. So Lorenzo got grandfather's middle name instead. Rossi eyes? Dark and too smart for their own good. Grandfather used to say the Rossi men saw too much and felt too little, but their eyes always gave them away. Isabella glanced toward the doorway where Lorenzo had appeared, silent as always. Speak of the devil. I need to borrow Evelyn for a moment, Lorenzo said without preamble. If she's willing. Evelyn exchanged a look with Isabella, who shrugged. Go ahead, I need to call Milan anyway. Lorenzo led her to his office, a room she'd never entered before. It was surprisingly Spartan. A massive desk, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a few pieces of art that looked old and valuable. The window overlooked the front drive, offering a clear view of anyone approaching. I have something for you, Lorenzo said, opening a desk drawer. He pulled out a manila folder and handed it to her. Inside was a birth certificate. Her birth certificate, along with her social security card, high school diploma, and several other documents she'd thought lost in the car crash. How did you... Evelyn's voice caught. I had someone retrieve what could be salvaged before the authorities impounded the wreckage. These were in a waterproof document folder in your trunk. Lorenzo's expression was unreadable. I thought you might want them, for when the baby comes. Evelyn stared at the papers in her hands, her vision blurring with sudden tears. These weren't just documents. They were proof she existed, proof she had a history before this strange new life. She'd thought them destroyed, thought she'd have to start over completely from nothing. Thank you, she managed. This means more than you know. I understand what it's like to lose pieces of yourself, Lorenzo said quietly, to feel like the person you were is gone, and all that's left is what other people need you to be. She looked up at him, really looked, and saw past the hardness to the exhaustion beneath. This man who'd inherited a legacy he never wanted, who spent his days managing violence and trying to build something better, who looked at her sometimes like she was a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. Lorenzo! The window exploded inward. Glass shattered across the office as gunfire erupted outside. Lorenzo moved before Evelyn could process what was happening, tackling her to the ground behind the desk as bullets tore through the space where they'd been standing. Stay down, he commanded, his body covering hers protectively. He pulled a gun from somewhere, his desk drawer maybe, and fired back through the broken window in one smooth motion. Evelyn's heart hammered against her ribs. The baby was kicking frantically, responding to her mother's terror. She could hear shouting in Italian, more gunfire, the squeal of tires on the front drive. Then silence, sudden and absolute. Lorenzo stayed frozen above her for another 10 seconds before cautiously rising, his gun still trained on the window. Blood ran down his face from a cut on his cheek where glass had struck him. Are you hurt? His eyes raked over her, checking for injuries. No, I don't think so. Evelyn's hands were shaking so badly she could barely speak. What was that? Marco. Lorenzo's voice was deadly calm. He just made his first serious mistake. Isabella burst through the door, her own gun drawn, her face white. Everyone's secure. 4 of Marco's men, all dead or running. They came in 2 vehicles, shot up the front of the house, and fled when our people returned fire. Evelyn? Isabella's eyes found her on the floor. I'm okay. We're okay. Evelyn pressed her hand to her belly, willing her racing heart to slow. Get her to the safe room, Lorenzo ordered, and call Dr. Castellano. I want her checked immediately. Lorenzo, I'm fine. Now, Isabella. His sister helped Evelyn to her feet and guided her quickly through the house to a section Evelyn had never seen before. Behind a false panel in the library was a reinforced door that opened onto a small, windowless room stocked with supplies. Wait here, Isabella said. Doctor, Castellano is on her way. Don't come out until I get you. Then Evelyn was alone in the safe room, the weight of what had just happened crushing down on her. Someone had just tried to kill Lorenzo, had nearly killed her and her baby in the process. This wasn't theoretical anymore. This wasn't stories about burned warehouses and territory disputes. This was real violence, real bullets, real danger, and she was caught in the middle of it. Doctor. Castellano arrived 20 minutes later, her medical bag in hand, her face grim. Let me see you, she said without preamble, already pulling out a blood pressure cuff. The examination was thorough and blessedly quick. The baby's heartbeat was strong. Evelyn's blood pressure was elevated, but not dangerously so. No injuries beyond a few minor cuts from flying glass that the doctor cleaned and bandaged. "You're lucky," Dr. Castellano said as she packed up her supplies. "A few inches to the left and those bullets would have found you." "I know." Evelyn's voice was hollow. "I need to leave. I can't put my baby at risk like this." "Where would you go that's safer than here?" The doctor's question was blunt. "Marco knows Lorenzo pulled someone from that highway now, even if he doesn't know who you are yet. If you leave, you're vulnerable. Here, you have protection." Protection? Someone just shot up the house and failed because Lorenzo has 40 men on this property who are very good at their jobs. Dr. Castellano met her eyes. "I've known the Rossi family for 20 years. I've patched up Lorenzo after fights that would have killed lesser men. He won't let anything happen to you or that baby, not while there's breath in his body." "That's what I'm afraid of," Evelyn whispered, "that he'll get himself killed protecting me." "Then you don't know him as well as you think." The doctor stood. "Lorenzo's survived this long because he's smart, not reckless. He won't throw his life away, even for you." The words stung more than they should have. After Dr. Castellano left, Isabella came to escort her back to her room. The office had been cleaned already, the broken window covered with thick plastic, the blood and glass swept away like the attack had never happened. But Evelyn could still see it, could still feel Lorenzo's weight covering her, protecting her even as bullets flew around them. "He's meeting with his advisors," Isabella said as they climbed the stairs. "Planning the response." "What kind of response?" "The kind that makes sure Marco never tries this again." Evelyn stopped walking. "He promised me he wouldn't do anything stupid." "This isn't stupid. This is necessary." Isabella's voice was hard. "Marco crossed a line today. He attacked Lorenzo's home. Put you and the baby at risk. That can't go unanswered." "So what, Lorenzo just kills him? Starts a war?" "The war's already started. We didn't choose it, but we're in it now." Isabella continued up the stairs, leaving Evelyn to follow. "And in this world, you either win or you die. There's no middle ground." Back in her room, Evelyn sat on the bed and stared at the walls that had felt safe just hours ago. Everything had changed with those bullets. The illusion of security, of being separate from Lorenzo's dangerous world, had shattered as completely as that office window. She couldn't stay here. Not anymore. But Dr. Castellano was right. Where else could she go? What shelter or halfway house could protect her from a man like Marco Bellini if he decided she mattered enough to target? The baby kicked, strong and insistent, and Evelyn made a decision. She found Lorenzo an hour later in the library, staring at maps spread across the table. His face was still cut from the glass, the wound cleaned but not bandaged. "You're planning to go after Marco," she said without preamble. Lorenzo didn't look up. "I'm planning to end this before anyone else gets hurt. By killing him. If necessary." His voice was flat, emotionless. "He attacked my home, Evelyn. Put you in danger. I can't let that stand." "So you're going to start a war that could get you killed?" She moved closer, forcing him to look at her. "That's your plan? Leave Isabella alone? Leave all these people who depend on you without protection just to satisfy your pride?" "This isn't about pride." "Then what is it about?" "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're about to throw away everything your grandfather built because some thug made you angry." Lorenzo's hands flattened on the table, his knuckles white. "He could have killed you today. You and the baby. Do you understand that? If I'd been standing anywhere else, if you'd been 2 feet to the left..." His voice cracked, just slightly, and Evelyn saw past his anger to the fear beneath. "But we weren't," she said softly. "We're alive. We're safe. Because you protected us. This time. What about next time? What about when he comes back with more men, better weapons, a smarter plan?" Lorenzo finally looked at her, and the raw emotion in his eyes stole her breath. "I can't lose you. Either of you. I won't. The confession hung between them, impossible to ignore. Then don't get yourself killed trying to protect us, Evelyn said. Because if you die, we're not safe. We're alone and vulnerable, and everything you're trying to prevent happens anyway. What would you have me do? Let Marco keep coming until he succeeds? I'd have you be smart, strategic. Everything Isabella says you usually are instead of the reckless idiot you're being right now. A ghost of a smile crossed Lorenzo's face. Reckless idiot? If the shoe fits. Evelyn moved closer, close enough to see the gold flecks in his dark eyes. You told me once that your grandfather taught you to think 3 moves ahead. So think. What does Marco want? My territory, my businesses, everything I have. Then give it to him. Lorenzo stared at her like she'd lost her mind. Excuse me? Not really, but make him think you're weak, that you're retreating. Give him small victories while you build a real strategy. Evelyn was improvising now, working through the logic as she spoke. You said he's trying to provoke you into making mistakes. So don't make any. Let him think he's winning while you figure out how to actually beat him. That could take weeks, months. Do you have somewhere more important to be? The question was flippant, but Lorenzo's expression turned serious. No, he said quietly. I don't. They stood there in the library, maps of the city spread between them, and something shifted in the air. An understanding, maybe, an acknowledgement of what they'd both been trying to ignore. I'll talk to my advisors, Lorenzo finally said. Consider other options. Thank you. He reached out and touched her face, his fingers gentle against her cheek. You're braver than you know. I'm terrified, Evelyn admitted. So am I. Lorenzo's thumb brushed her skin, a feather-light touch that sent heat through her entire body. But I'm beginning to think that being terrified together is better than being safe alone. Before she could respond, he dropped his hand and stepped back, the moment breaking. You should rest, he said, his voice returning to its usual control. It's been a difficult day. Evelyn nodded, not trusting herself to speak, and left him alone with his maps and his impossible decisions. That night she lay in bed listening to the sounds of the house, footsteps in the hallway, low voices speaking Italian, the hum of security systems doing their work. She was safe here, as safe as she could be anywhere. And somewhere in this house was a man who'd thrown himself between her and bullets without hesitation, who looked at her like she was something precious and breakable and worth protecting. It was dangerous, letting herself care about Lorenzo Rossi. But as the baby kicked and turned inside her, Evelyn realized it was already too late to stop. The week following the attack passed in a strange state of heightened tension and forced normalcy. Security doubled around the estate. Men with rifles patrolled the perimeter day and night. Every car that approached was stopped and searched 3 times before being allowed through the gates. Isabella moved into one of the empty guest rooms, claiming she wanted to be closer to Evelyn, but really, they both knew, seeking the safety of numbers. And Lorenzo became a ghost. Evelyn saw him only in passing now. A shadow leaving before dawn, returning long after midnight, his face drawn with exhaustion and something darker. He was planning something, she knew, working the angles, playing the long game she'd convinced him to pursue instead of immediate violence. But it was costing him. She could see it in the tightness around his eyes, the way his shoulders carried tension like a physical weight. He's meeting with the other families, Isabella explained one afternoon. They were in the sunroom, though Evelyn noticed Isabella kept her back to the wall now, positioned where she could see both doors. Trying to build a coalition against Marco without starting an all-out war. Is it working? Slowly. The old guard respects what our grandfather built, but they're wary of Lorenzo's push toward legitimacy. They think it makes us soft. Isabella's laugh was bitter, as if wanting to build something that lasts beyond the next generation is weakness. Evelyn shifted in her chair, trying to find a comfortable position. At 8 months pregnant, comfortable was becoming a distant memory. The baby seemed to have run out of room and was making her displeasure known with constant kicks and rolls. "What does Lorenzo want?" she asked. "Long term, I mean. If he could walk away from all of this, what would he do?" Isabella was quiet for a long moment, considering the question. "When we were kids, before our father died, Lorenzo used to draw buildings, elaborate sketches of houses and museums and bridges. He'd spend hours getting the proportions perfect, explaining how the structure would support the weight, where the light would fall." She smiled at the memory. He wanted to build things that would outlast him, create beauty instead of managing violence. He still could. After this is over, "This is never over," Isabella interrupted gently. "That's what you need to understand, Evelyn. There's no walking away from what we are, what we've built. Lorenzo can try to make it better, make it cleaner, but he'll never be free of it completely. The name Rossi means something in this world, and that meaning comes with obligations that don't expire." The word settled over Evelyn like a weight. She'd been telling herself that this was temporary, that once the baby came and the situation with Marco resolved, she could leave and build a normal life somewhere far from the Rossi family and their dangerous legacy. But the truth was becoming harder to ignore. She didn't want to leave. Not the estate with its strange safety, not Isabella with her sharp wit and surprising kindness, and definitely not Lorenzo, whose rare smiles had started to feel like something precious, whose presence made her feel protected in ways she'd never experienced before. She was falling for him, had probably already fallen, somewhere between the moment he pulled her from the snow and the moment he'd covered her body with his own when bullets flew, and that terrified her more than Marco Bellini ever could. That night, unable to sleep, Evelyn wandered downstairs to the kitchen. Maria had left hours ago, but the industrial refrigerator was well stocked. She was contemplating whether pickles and ice cream was actually a pregnancy craving or just a cliché when she heard the front door open. Lorenzo's voice carried down the hallway, speaking rapid Italian to someone. She heard another voice respond, male, older, unfamiliar. Curiosity won out over caution. Evelyn moved quietly toward the foyer, staying in the shadows where she could hear but not be seen. "Cannot keep refusing him," the unfamiliar voice was saying in accented English. "Marco grows bolder because you show weakness." "Strategic patience isn't weakness, Antonio." Lorenzo sounded exhausted. "It's called not walking into an obvious trap. Your grandfather would have handled this already. One bullet, problem solved. My grandfather also spent the last 5 years of his life looking over his shoulder, waiting for the retaliation that never came because he died first." Lorenzo's voice hardened. "I won't live like that, and I won't build an empire on bodies that could have been avoided." "Then what will you build it on? Good intentions?" Antonio's scoff was audible. "You're trying to be legitimate in an illegitimate world. It doesn't work. It has to work. Because the alternative is we all end up dead or in prison, and everything 3 generations built turns to dust." There was a long silence. Then Antonio spoke again, his voice softer. "You care about her, the pregnant girl." Evelyn's breath caught. "That's none of your concern," Lorenzo said flatly. "It is when it clouds your judgment. Marco knows about her now, Lorenzo. That attack wasn't random. He knows you're protecting someone, and he'll use that against you." "Then I'll make sure he can't reach her." "By doing what? Hiding her forever? Starting a family in the middle of a war?" Antonio's voice turned almost pitying. "You can't have both worlds. You can't be the man who runs this organization and the man who gets a normal life. Your grandfather learned that. Your father learned it. And you'll learn it too." "Then I'll prove you wrong." "For her sake, I hope you do. But hope doesn't stop bullets, Lorenzo. And Marco has a lot of bullets." Footsteps approached and Evelyn retreated quickly to the kitchen, her heart pounding. She was leaning against the counter, trying to look casual, when Lorenzo appeared in the doorway. "Can't sleep?" he asked, loosening his tie. "The baby's doing gymnastics." It wasn't entirely a lie. "Who was that?" "Antonio Marchetti, one of my grandfather's oldest associates." Lorenzo moved to the refrigerator, pulling out a bottle of water. He's concerned I'm not handling Marco aggressively enough. And what do you think? Lorenzo drank half the bottle before answering. I think Antonio's from a different time, when violence was the first solution instead of the last resort. He set the bottle down, his eyes finding hers. How much did you hear? Enough to know people think I'm making you weak. People think a lot of things. Most of them are wrong. Lorenzo leaned against the counter beside her, close enough that she could smell his cologne mixed with the winter night air he'd carried in. You're not making me weak, Evelyn. You're making me want to be better than what I am. What if better gets you killed? Then at least I'll die trying to build something worth leaving behind instead of just maintaining what came before. His hand found hers on the counter, his fingers threading through hers. I meant what I said the other night. I can't lose you, either of you. Evelyn knew she should pull away, should remind him that she was homeless and pregnant with another man's child, that she had nothing to offer someone like him, that this was dangerous and complicated and probably a terrible idea. But his hand was warm in hers, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, she didn't feel alone. I'm scared, she admitted quietly, of Marco, of this life, of what it means that I don't want to leave even though I know I should. I'm scared too. Lorenzo's thumb traced circles on her palm. But I'm more scared of what my life looks like if you're not in it. The confession hung between them, raw and honest. Then the baby kicked, hard enough that Evelyn gasped, and the moment broke. Lorenzo pulled his hand back, professional distance reasserting itself. You should rest. Dr. Castellano would have my head if she knew I was keeping you up. Lorenzo. Good night, Evelyn. He left before she could find the words to call him back, and she was alone in the kitchen with her racing heart and the growing certainty that whatever was happening between them was inevitable, dangerous, and utterly beyond her control. The next morning brought news that changed everything. Evelyn was in the sunroom with Isabella, reviewing contracts, when Lorenzo burst in with his phone pressed to his ear and murder in his eyes. When? He demanded into the phone. A pause. How many? Another pause, longer this time. I'm on my way. He hung up and looked at Isabella. Marco took Sophie. Isabella went pale. When? 20 minutes ago. Grabbed her outside her apartment, left a message that he wants to talk terms. Who's Sophie? Evelyn asked, looking between them. My best friend, Isabella said, her voice shaking. She runs a gallery downtown. She has nothing to do with any of this. That's exactly why Marco took her. Lorenzo was already moving toward the door. He knows I won't negotiate for business associates or soldiers, but someone Isabella cares about, someone innocent, that puts pressure on us to make mistakes. We're calling the police, Evelyn said. Right now. This is kidnapping. The police can't help. Lorenzo's voice was hard. By the time they finish asking questions, Sophie will be dead. This needs to be handled our way. Your way gets people killed. Not helping gets Sophie killed for certain. He stopped at the door, his hand on the frame. I'm going to get her back. Stay here. Don't leave the estate for any reason. Lorenzo, wait. Isabella started, but he was already gone, his footsteps echoing down the hallway. Isabella sank into a chair, her head in her hands. This is my fault. I brought her to a family dinner last month. Marco must have seen us together, figured out she mattered to me. This is Marco's fault, Evelyn corrected. He's the one terrorizing people. And Lorenzo's the one who's going to get himself killed trying to save her. Isabella looked up, her eyes wet. He'll walk into whatever trap Marco's set because he won't let an innocent person die on his watch. It's who he is, and it's going to destroy him. Evelyn's mind raced. Lorenzo was walking into danger right now, probably outnumbered, definitely expected. The smart play would be to wait, to plan, to use the strategic patience he'd been showing for weeks. But Sophie didn't have weeks. She had hours at best. Where would Marco take her? Evelyn asked. I don't know. He has a dozen properties around the city. Any one of them could... Isabella stopped, her eyes widening. The warehouse on Industrial Boulevard. It's the only one with a basement, the only place he could hold someone securely. You need to tell Lorenzo. He knows. He'll have already figured it out. Isabella stood abruptly. I need to call our people, coordinate backup. No? The word came out stronger than Evelyn intended. You need to go with him. Evelyn, I can't leave you here alone. I'll have 40 guards and every security system money can buy. I'll be fine. Evelyn grabbed Isabella's arm. But Lorenzo needs someone watching his back who actually cares whether he lives or dies. Not just soldiers following orders. You. Isabella stared at her for a long moment. Then she pulled out her phone and made a call. Marco, it's Isabella Rossi. I want to talk terms for Sophie's release. Her voice was steady, cold. Tell me where you are. She listened, her face unreadable. Fine. I'm coming alone. But if she's hurt, there's nowhere you can hide that my brother won't find you. After she hung up, Isabella looked at Evelyn. He's at the Industrial Boulevard warehouse like I thought. He's expecting Lorenzo. I'm going to meet him instead. Buy time for our people to get in position. That's insane. You just said Lorenzo walking into a trap would get him killed. Now you want to do it? I want to save my best friend and my brother, which means one of us needs to be the distraction. Isabella was already moving toward the door. Lock yourself in the safe room until this is over. Don't come out for anyone except Lorenzo or me. Isabella, wait. But she was gone, running toward whatever confrontation was brewing, leaving Evelyn alone in the sunroom with her fear and her helplessness. The baby kicked, as if reminding Evelyn that she had her own person to protect now. She should go to the safe room like Isabella said, lock the door and wait for someone to tell her it was over. But the thought of sitting in that small room while Lorenzo and Isabella walked into danger made her feel sick. She pulled out her phone and did something she hadn't done since the accident. She called someone from her old life. Hello? The voice was familiar. Casey, a waitress from the Highway Star Diner who'd always been kind to Evelyn. Casey, it's Evelyn Hart. I need a favor and I can't explain why. There was a pause. Evelyn, everyone thought you were dead. Your car was found burned on the highway and nobody's heard from you in weeks. I know. I'm alive, but I need you to trust me. Evelyn took a breath. I need you to call the police and report suspicious activity at the warehouse on Industrial Boulevard. Tell them you heard gunshots, saw people being forced inside against their will. Make it urgent. What's going on? Are you in trouble? Just please, Casey, do this for me. Lives depend on it. Another pause. Okay, I'll call it in. But Evelyn, are you safe? Do you need help? I'm safer than I've been in a long time, Evelyn said, surprised to find it was true. Thank you. She hung up before Casey could ask more questions, then made her way as quickly as her pregnant body would allow to Lorenzo's office. His computer was locked, but his phone charger sat on the desk. Next to it was a business card for someone named Detective Sarah Chen. Evelyn took a chance and dialed the number. Chen. Detective, my name is Evelyn Hart. I have information about a kidnapping in progress at the warehouse on Industrial Boulevard. A woman named Sophie Cardenas was taken by Marco Bellini approximately 30 minutes ago. Who is this? How do you know? I know because I'm calling from Lorenzo Rossi's estate, and his sister just left to try to save her friend before Marco kills her. Evelyn spoke quickly, clearly. I know you probably have files on both families. I know you'd love nothing more than to catch them all in the act. Well, they're all going to be at that warehouse in the next 20 minutes. If you want to finally do something about the violence in this city, now's your chance. Miss Hart, if this is some kind of... It's not. People are going to die tonight if someone doesn't intervene. You can be that someone, or you can explain to Sophie Cardenas's family why you didn't act when you had the chance. Evelyn hung up before the detective could respond, her hands shaking. She'd just set events in motion she couldn't control. had potentially put Lorenzo and Isabella in more danger by involving the police, but sitting back and doing nothing while they walked into a trap wasn't something she could live with. The baby kicked again, and Evelyn pressed her hand to her belly. "Your mom's making some really questionable choices tonight," she whispered. "Let's hope they don't get everyone killed." An hour passed. Then two. Evelyn paced the sunroom, her phone clutched in her hand, waiting for news. The guards outside maintained their positions, unaware of what was happening across the city. Or maybe they knew and had been ordered to stay put, to protect the estate rather than rushing to Lorenzo's aid. When her phone finally rang, she nearly dropped it. "Hello? It's me." Isabella's voice was tight but alive. "We got Sophie. She's hurt, but she'll survive." Relief flooded through Evelyn so powerfully her knees went weak. "And Lorenzo?" "He's fine. Furious, but fine." There was a pause, then Isabella's voice dropped. "Did you call the police?" "I called a detective and a friend to report suspicious activity. I couldn't just sit here while you two played hero." The detective showed up with half the precinct just as we were leaving. "Marco and his people are in custody." Isabella laughed, a slightly hysterical sound. "You just ended a territory war with a phone call. Is that good or bad?" "It's complicated. Lorenzo will explain when we get back." "But Evelyn? Thank you. If the police hadn't shown up when they did, things would have gotten a lot bloodier." After Isabella hung up, Evelyn sank onto the sofa and let herself shake. She'd gambled with other people's lives, made decisions that weren't hers to make. But Sophie was alive. Isabella was alive. Lorenzo was alive. Whatever consequences came from her actions, she'd deal with them. They returned near midnight. Lorenzo, Isabella, and a woman Evelyn assumed was Sophie, her arm in a makeshift sling and a bruise blooming across her left cheek. Dr. Castellano was already waiting, ushering Sophie toward the medical room, while Isabella hovered anxiously. Lorenzo found Evelyn in the library, where she'd been pretending to read for the past hour. "You called the police," he said without preamble. "I did. That was dangerous and reckless and could have gotten everyone killed. But it didn't." Evelyn set down her book. "It ended things before anyone else got hurt. It ended things before I could handle them my way." Lorenzo's voice was hard, angry. "Do you understand what you've done? Marco's in police custody, which means he's talking, which means investigations, subpoenas, pressure on everyone he's ever done business with, including me. So you're angry that I saved lives because it might make things complicated for you? I'm angry because you put yourself at risk." Lorenzo's control finally cracked. "You think the police being involved makes you safer? It makes you a witness, Evelyn. Someone who can testify about what you've seen, what you know. That makes you a target for everyone Marco talked to. Everyone who wants to make sure certain information never sees a courtroom." The implication hit her like cold water. In trying to help, she'd made everything worse. "I didn't think—" "No, you didn't." Lorenzo ran his hand through his hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. "You acted on emotion instead of strategy, and now we're all dealing with the consequences." "I'm sorry." The words felt inadequate. "I was trying to help." "I know." Some of the anger drained from his voice. "And you did help. Sophie's alive because the police interrupted before Marco could do real damage. But Evelyn, you can't make decisions like that without understanding all the angles. This world doesn't forgive good intentions." "Then maybe you should teach me," she said quietly. "Teach me the angles. Help me understand how your world works instead of just expecting me to sit quietly in the safe room while everyone else takes risks." Lorenzo stared at her for a long moment. "Why?" "Because I'm not leaving." The truth came out firm, certain. "I thought I would, once the baby came, once things settled, but I don't want to. This place, your family, I don't want to walk away from any of it. You're saying this because you're grateful, because we helped you when you had nothing. I'm saying this because it's true." Evelyn stood, moving closer to him. "I'm saying it because when bullets started flying, My first thought wasn't about protecting myself. It was about protecting you, because somewhere in the past 2 months, you stopped being the stranger who saved my life and became someone I can't imagine my life without. The confession hung between them, raw and impossible to take back. Evelyn, you don't have to say anything. I know this is complicated. I know I come with a lot of baggage and a baby that isn't yours, and a complete lack of understanding about your world. She took a breath. But I'm choosing to stay anyway. If you'll have me. Lorenzo's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone with infinite gentleness. You have no idea what you're asking for. Then show me. He kissed her then, and it felt like falling and flying at the same time. His lips were warm against hers, tasting of coffee and the winter night. Evelyn's arms came up around his neck, pulling him closer despite the baby bump between them, and Lorenzo's hand settled on her waist with a tenderness that made her chest ache. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Lorenzo rested his forehead against hers. This is a mistake, he murmured. Probably. I can't promise you safe. I can't promise you normal. I don't want safe or normal. I want real. And you're the most real thing I've found in years. Lorenzo kissed her again, softer this time, like a promise. Then stay. Build something with me. Help me turn this empire into something worth leaving to the next generation. Starting with her. Evelyn took his hand and placed it on her belly, right where the baby was kicking. She deserves better than the world we were born into, so let's build her something better. Lorenzo's hand spread across her stomach, his eyes widening as he felt the baby move beneath his palm. She's strong. She has to be. Look at the family she's inheriting. The joke made Lorenzo smile, real and warm and completely unguarded. We're completely insane, aren't we? Absolutely. Evelyn leaned into him, letting herself rest against his solid warmth. But I'd rather be insane with you than sensible anywhere else. They stood like that in the library, the fire burning low in the grate, the house settling around them. Outside, guards maintained their positions. In the medical room, Dr. Castellano was treating Sophie's injuries. Somewhere across the city, Marco Bellini sat in a police cell, and the territory war that had consumed weeks of violence ended not with bullets, but with handcuffs. And in Lorenzo's arms, Evelyn felt something she hadn't felt since before Dylan threw her into that snowstorm. Hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, from the wreckage of her old life, she could build something better. Something real. Something that would last. The baby kicked again, as if in agreement, and Lorenzo's hand tightened protectively over her belly. I'm going to keep you both safe, he promised. Whatever it takes. I know, Evelyn said. That's why I'm staying. The consequences of Marco's arrest came swiftly, and from directions Evelyn hadn't anticipated. 2 days after that kiss in the library, Detective Sarah Chen arrived at the estate with a warrant to question Lorenzo about his business dealings. She was professional but persistent, her questions sharp and informed by whatever Marco had told them in exchange for a lighter sentence. Evelyn watched from the sunroom as Lorenzo sat across from the detective in his office, his lawyer present, his answers carefully measured. The investigation would take months, Chen warned. There would be subpoenas, depositions, intense scrutiny of every business transaction the Rossi family had conducted in the past decade. Your boyfriend made some interesting allegations, Chen said as she was leaving, her eyes finding Evelyn standing in the hallway. About protection rackets, money laundering, illegal imports. Most of it's probably bullshit, but we have to investigate anyway. He's not my boyfriend, Evelyn said quietly. And Marco Bellini kidnapped an innocent woman. Whatever he's saying now is designed to hurt Lorenzo, not tell the truth. Maybe. Or maybe you're too close to see what's really happening here. Chen's expression wasn't unkind, just concerned. You seem like a smart woman, Miss Hart. Smart enough to know that men like Lorenzo Rossi don't change just because they fall in love. The violence, the crime, it's who they are. And if you stay, you become part of it. The detective left before Evelyn could respond, but her words lingered like smoke. That night, Evelyn found Lorenzo in the library staring at documents his lawyer had left behind. He looked exhausted, the weight of the investigation already showing in the tightness around his eyes. "Detective Chen thinks I'm making a mistake," Evelyn said, settling carefully into the chair across from him. At 36 weeks pregnant, even simple movements required planning. She's probably right. Lorenzo didn't look up from the papers. "This investigation is going to get ugly. They'll dig into everything, my grandfather's businesses, my father's dealings, every gray area I've ever operated in. And you'll be caught in the middle of it. So what are you saying, that I should leave?" "I'm saying you should think very carefully about what you're signing up for." Finally, he met her eyes. "Marco's talking. The police are watching. Every move I make from now on will be scrutinized, and anyone close to me becomes a potential witness, a potential target, a potential liability." "I'm not afraid of being a liability." "You should be." Lorenzo's voice was hard. "Because in my world, liabilities get eliminated, and I can't protect you if I'm spending all my time fighting legal battles." The fear beneath his words was palpable. He was trying to push her away, she realized, trying to protect her the only way he knew how, by making her leave before things got worse. "What if I don't want your protection?" Evelyn said. "What if I want to stand beside you instead of hiding behind you?" "Then you're a fool." "Probably. But I'm your fool, whether you want me or not." She stood, moving around the desk until she was close enough to take his hands. "Lorenzo, listen to me. I've spent my whole life letting other people make decisions for me. My mother decided I was a disappointment. Dylan decided I wasn't worth keeping. Even you're trying to decide what's best for me right now." She squeezed his fingers. "But this is my choice. I'm choosing you. I'm choosing this life. And I'm choosing to fight for it instead of running away." "You don't know what you're choosing." "Then teach me. Show me how to be strong enough to survive in your world instead of expecting me to leave it." Evelyn's voice was steady, certain. "I'm not going anywhere, Lorenzo. So you can either let me help you or you can keep pushing me away. But either way, I'm staying." Lorenzo pulled her onto his lap despite her pregnant belly, his arms wrapping around her like she was something precious he was afraid to break. "You're going to regret this." "Maybe. But it'll be my regret, not yours." He kissed her then, and it tasted like surrender and hope mixed together in equal measure. The investigation intensified over the following weeks. Federal agents joined the local police, creating a task force specifically targeting organized crime in the region. Lorenzo spent long hours with his lawyers, turning over financial records, proving the legitimacy of his current operations while carefully navigating questions about the past. And through it all, Evelyn's pregnancy advanced toward its inevitable conclusion. Dr. Castellano pronounced her healthy and ready, warning that the baby could come any day now. Isabella helped her prepare a nursery in one of the empty bedrooms, soft yellows and greens, carefully neutral, with a crib Lorenzo had assembled himself despite never having done such a thing before. "You're nesting," Isabella observed one afternoon, watching Evelyn rearrange stuffed animals for the third time. "That's a good sign. Or I'm going crazy from being trapped in this house for 2 months." Evelyn adjusted a teddy bear, then moved it back to its original position. "I can't remember the last time I went anywhere besides Dr. Castellano's exam room. It's not safe yet, not with the investigation and Marco's people still out there." Isabella sat on the rocking chair Lorenzo had brought down from the attic, his mother's chair, saved through decades of storage. "But Lorenzo's working on it. He's meeting with the federal prosecutor tomorrow, trying to negotiate immunity in exchange for information on some of the other families." Evelyn's head snapped up. "He's turning informant?" "He's buying our freedom. There's a difference." Isabella's voice was careful. "If he gives them enough to shut down some of the worst operations, the ones he's been trying to distance himself from anyway, they'll leave us alone. We keep the legitimate businesses, close down everything else, and walk away clean. And the people he informs on, what happens to them?" They face consequences for their choices, same as Marco. Isabella met her eyes. I know it sounds cold, but these are men who've chosen violence over progress, who've refused every opportunity Lorenzo gave them to go legitimate. He can't save people who don't want to be saved. It was a harsh logic, but Evelyn was starting to understand the calculations Lorenzo had to make. Every decision balanced between loyalty and survival, between the past his grandfather built and the future he was trying to create. Will it work? She asked quietly. I don't know, but it's the best chance we have. That night, Evelyn woke to a sharp pain in her lower back and the unmistakable sensation of her water breaking. The baby was coming. She managed to wake Lorenzo, who'd been sleeping in the chair beside her bed ever since Dr. Castellano warned that labor could start any time. He was instantly alert, already reaching for his phone to call the doctor. How far apart are the contractions? He asked, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. I don't know. I just woke up. Another contraction hit, and Evelyn gripped his hand, breathing through the pain like Dr. Castellano had taught her. Maybe 5 minutes? We need to get you to the hospital. No hospitals. The decision was instant, instinctive. Too public, too many questions. Dr. Castellano can deliver her here. Evelyn, if something goes wrong, then we deal with it. But I'm not having my baby in some hospital where federal agents might be waiting to question me the moment she's born. Another contraction, stronger this time. Please, Lorenzo, let me do this here where it's safe. He searched her face for a long moment, then nodded. I'll call the doctor. Dr. Castellano arrived within 20 minutes, her medical bag packed for exactly this scenario. Isabella was right behind her, her face pale but determined. How are you feeling? The doctor asked, already checking Evelyn's vital signs. Like there's a human trying to claw her way out of my body. That's accurate. Dr. Castellano's smile was brief. You're at 6 centimeters. We've got a few hours still, but this baby's definitely coming tonight. Those hours were the longest of Evelyn's life. The contractions came in waves, each one stronger than the last, until pain became her entire universe. Lorenzo stayed beside her throughout, letting her squeeze his hand until she was sure she'd broken bones, speaking quietly in Italian when the pain got too bad, words she didn't understand but found comforting anyway. You're doing beautifully, doctor, Castellano said as she checked Evelyn's progress again. 9 centimeters, almost there. I can't do this, Evelyn gasped between contractions. It hurts too much. I can't. Yes, you can. Lorenzo's voice was firm, his hand solid in hers. You survived a car crash. You survived Dylan's betrayal. You survived being thrown into a blizzard with nothing. You can survive this. That's different. This is harder, he interrupted. And you're still going to do it. Because you're the strongest person I've ever met, and that baby needs you to be strong just a little bit longer. The next contraction hit and Evelyn bore down, following Dr. Castellano's instructions, pushing with everything she had left. The pain was enormous, all-consuming, beyond anything she'd imagined. And then, suddenly, it was over. A baby's cry filled the room, strong, healthy, furious at being forced into the cold world. It's a girl, doctor, Castellano announced, laying the tiny, wriggling infant on Evelyn's chest, perfect in every way. Evelyn looked down at her daughter and felt her entire world shift. The baby was red-faced and screaming, her tiny fists waving, her eyes squeezed shut against the light. She was beautiful and terrifying and absolutely real. Hi, Evelyn whispered, tears streaming down her face. Hi, baby girl. I'm your mom. The baby's cries quieted at the sound of her voice, one eye cracking open as if to see who was speaking. Lorenzo stood beside the bed, his face transformed by wonder. Can I? He asked, gesturing toward the baby. Evelyn nodded, too overwhelmed to speak, and watched as Lorenzo carefully took the baby in his arms. He held her like she was made of glass, his large hands impossibly gentle, his expression soft in a way she'd never seen before. "She's perfect," he said quietly. "What's her name?" Evelyn had thought about this question for months, running through hundreds of possibilities. But looking at her daughter now, held in the arms of the man who'd saved them both, only one name felt right. "Valentina," she said, "after your grandfather. The man who built something from nothing and never forgot where he came from." Lorenzo's eyes met hers, and she saw the emotion there: gratitude, love, hope for a future neither of them could have predicted. "Valentina Rossi," he said, testing the name, "if you'll allow it." "She's yours," Evelyn said simply. "Maybe not by blood, but by choice. You've been her father since the moment you pulled us from that snow. Making it official is just paperwork." The days following Valentina's birth passed in a blur of feedings and diaper changes and sleepless nights. Dr. Castellano visited daily, pronouncing both mother and baby healthy. Isabella was a constant presence, helping with everything, her face soft with love every time she held her new niece. And Lorenzo transformed into someone Evelyn barely recognized, a man who took 2-hour shifts walking a crying baby at 3 in the morning, who changed diapers with meticulous care, who stared at Valentina like she was a miracle he couldn't quite believe in. "You're good at this," Evelyn observed one night, watching him rock Valentina back to sleep after a feeding. "I have no idea what I'm doing." "Neither do I, but we're figuring it out together." She moved to stand beside him, looking down at their daughter's tiny face. "She's going to have a good life, isn't she? Better than what we had." "Better than anything I could have imagined," Lorenzo promised. "I'm meeting with the prosecutor again tomorrow. Final negotiations. If it goes well, we're done. No more investigations, no more threats, just a clean slate and a legitimate business to build. And if it doesn't go well, then we fight. But I don't think it'll come to that." He shifted Valentina carefully, her small body completely relaxed in sleep. "I'm giving them everything they want: information on the drug operations Marco was running, connections to the trafficking network some of the other families operate, evidence of corruption in the city government. In exchange, we get immunity and they leave us alone. You're burning every bridge. I'm building new ones, better ones." Lorenzo looked at her, his eyes steady. "I want Valentina to grow up in a world where her father's a legitimate businessman, not a criminal, where she can be proud of the Rossi name instead of ashamed of it. And that means letting go of everything my grandfather built, no matter how much it hurts." The sacrifice implicit in his words made Evelyn's chest tight. "He'd be proud of you anyway, for choosing her future over his legacy." "I hope so." Lorenzo carefully placed Valentina in her crib, tucking the blanket around her with practiced care. "Because there's no going back after tomorrow. Once I give them that information, I'm done with this life forever." The meeting with the federal prosecutor lasted 6 hours. Evelyn spent that time in the nursery with Valentina, trying not to watch the clock, trying not to imagine everything that could go wrong. Isabella sat with her, neither of them speaking much, both lost in their own fears. When Lorenzo finally returned, his face was unreadable. "Well?" Isabella demanded, standing. "It's done." Lorenzo sank into the rocking chair, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. "They're taking the deal. Full immunity for both of us in exchange for testimony and evidence. The investigation into our current businesses is closed. We're free." The relief that flooded through Evelyn was so powerful she had to sit down. "It's really over?" "The criminal part, yes. The legitimate businesses continue. The imports are real and profitable. The real estate holdings are clean. We'll be fine financially." Lorenzo's smile was tired but genuine. "We're not rich by our old standards, but we're comfortable. And more importantly, we're legal." "What about the people you informed on?" "They'll be arrested over the next few weeks. Some will cut their own deals, some will go to prison. But that's not our concern anymore." He looked at Valentina sleeping peacefully in her crib, oblivious to how her existence had changed everything. We're out. Completely. Finally, out. Isabella let out a breath she'd been holding for what felt like months. I need a drink. Make it two, Lorenzo said. We're celebrating. That night, with Valentina asleep and Isabella retired to her room, Evelyn and Lorenzo sat in the library with glasses of wine, hers barely touched, his empty and refilled twice. Are you okay? She asked quietly. With everything you had to give up? I gave up a legacy built on violence and fear. What I kept is worth so much more. Lorenzo pulled her close, mindful of her still healing body. I have you. I have Valentina. I have a chance to build something clean, something good. That's more than my grandfather ever had, more than I thought possible a year ago. A year ago, I was working at a diner, planning a future with a man who didn't want me, Evelyn said. Funny how much can change. Funny isn't the word I'd use. Miraculous, maybe. Impossible. Lorenzo kissed her forehead. I pulled you from the snow because I couldn't leave you there to die. I never imagined you'd become the reason I wanted to live. The rawness of the confession made Evelyn's eyes burn. I love you, she said, the words coming easier than she'd expected. I don't know when it happened or how, but I love you. You and this impossible life we're building together. I love you too. Lorenzo's arms tightened around her. And tomorrow, if you'll have me, I want to make it official. Official? Marry me, Evelyn. Not because you owe me anything or because Valentina needs a father. She has that already. Marry me because you want to, because you choose this, because you can't imagine your life without me any more than I can imagine mine without you. Evelyn pulled back enough to look at his face, seeing the vulnerability there, the fear of rejection mixed with hope. This man who'd faced down criminals and federal prosecutors, who commanded respect through sheer force of will, was asking her to marry him like he genuinely believed she might say no. Yes, she said simply. Of course, yes. Lorenzo kissed her then, deep and thorough, tasting of wine and relief and promises neither of them could have made when they first met, but both were ready to keep now. They married 3 weeks later in the estate garden, surrounded by early spring flowers and the small circle of people who'd become their family. Isabella stood as witness, holding Valentina throughout the brief ceremony. Dr. Castellano was there, along with Sophie, still healing but smiling. A handful of Lorenzo's business associates who'd made the transition to legitimacy attended, their presence a bridge between the old world and the new. There was no priest. Neither of them wanted religious ceremony, just a judge who'd been a friend of Lorenzo's grandfather and understood what this wedding represented. A fresh start, a clean break from the past, a future built on choice rather than obligation. I, Lorenzo Rossi, take you, Evelyn Hart, to be my wife, Lorenzo said, his voice steady, his eyes never leaving hers. I promise to protect you and Valentina with everything I have. I promise to build a life worthy of your trust. And I promise to love you every day for the rest of my life, no matter what comes. I, Evelyn Hart, take you, Lorenzo Rossi, to be my husband, Evelyn replied, her voice stronger than she'd expected. I promise to stand beside you, not behind you. I promise to help you build something better than what came before. And I promise to love you fiercely, completely, for as long as we both live. The rings were simple gold bands. No diamonds, no ostentation, just solid metal that would last. Lorenzo slipped one onto her finger with hands that shook slightly, and Evelyn did the same for him, sealing promises that felt more real than any she'd made before. By the power vested in me by the state of Montana, the judge intoned with a smile, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Lorenzo kissed her as the small gathering applauded, and Evelyn felt something settle in her chest, a sense of belonging, of home, of rightness that had eluded her entire life until now. When they broke apart, Valentina started crying, as if outraged at being excluded from this important moment. Evelyn took her daughter from Isabella's arms, and Lorenzo wrapped his arms around them both, creating a circle of warmth and safety and love. "Welcome to the family, Mrs. Rossi," Isabella said, her eyes bright with tears. "About time you made it official." The reception was small but joyful. Maria had cooked for days, creating an elaborate Italian feast that filled the dining room with incredible smells. Wine flowed freely for everyone except Evelyn, who was still nursing and content with sparkling water. Stories were told, toasts were made, and for a few hours the weight of everything they'd survived lifted enough to let happiness in. As evening fell and guests began to leave, Evelyn found herself in the nursery with Valentina, rocking slowly while her daughter nursed. Through the window, she could see Lorenzo in the garden, speaking quietly with the judge, probably finalizing some last piece of business. She thought about the woman she'd been a year ago, broken, desperate, convinced she was going to die alone in the snow. That woman couldn't have imagined this life. This man, this strange, impossible family built from wreckage and hope. "Your mama was lost," Evelyn whispered to Valentina, "but your daddy found us, and he gave us a home." The baby's eyes drifted closed, milk-drunk and content, completely unaware of the miracle of her own existence. Lorenzo entered quietly, his jacket discarded, his tie loosened. "Is she asleep?" "Getting there," Evelyn smiled up at him. "How does it feel to be a married man?" "Ask me in 50 years. I'll let you know then." Lorenzo sat on the floor beside the rocking chair, his hand resting on Evelyn's knee. "Thank you." "For what?" "For saying yes. For staying when any sane person would have run. For giving me a reason to be better than what I was." His eyes were soft, vulnerable in the low light. "I don't deserve you or Valentina, but I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to earn you anyway." "You already have," Evelyn said quietly. "The moment you stopped in that blizzard instead of driving past. The moment you chose mercy over violence. The moment you held our daughter like she was your own." "She is my own. Biology doesn't matter. She's mine in every way that counts." They sat in comfortable silence while Valentina finished nursing and drifted into deep sleep. Lorenzo carefully took her from Evelyn's arms and placed her in the crib, tucking the blanket around her with the expertise he'd gained over the past month. "What happens now?" Evelyn asked as they stood together, looking down at their sleeping daughter. "Now we build. The import business is growing. I have contracts with galleries across the country, legitimate work that's actually profitable. The real estate holdings are diversifying, and I'm starting a foundation." Lorenzo glanced at her. "To help immigrant families, provide resources and legal support, the kind of help my grandfather needed when he arrived and couldn't find. That's beautiful. It's necessary. All the money my grandfather made through questionable means, I want to use it for something good. Something that helps instead of hurts." His arm came around her waist. "And I want Valentina to grow up knowing that the Rossi name means helping people, not exploiting them." Evelyn leaned into his warmth, watching their daughter sleep. "She's going to have such a good life." "We all are," Lorenzo promised. "No more looking over our shoulders. No more violence. Just a family, building a future together." It sounded almost too simple. But as Evelyn stood there in the nursery they'd built together, in the house that had become her home, beside the man who'd saved her life and then given her a reason to live it fully, simple felt exactly right. The months that followed brought changes both subtle and profound. The federal investigation concluded with multiple arrests of Marco's associates and several other crime families. Lorenzo's testimony was sealed, his identity as an informant protected, but word spread anyway through the networks of people who made it their business to know such things. Some viewed him as a traitor. Others saw him as the smart one who got out before the walls closed in. Lorenzo didn't care either way. He was too busy running legitimate businesses and coming home to his family every night. The import company thrived. Lorenzo's eye for art and his grandfather's old connections in Italy created a pipeline of beautiful pieces that American galleries couldn't get enough of. The foundation launched quietly, providing legal services, language classes, and job placement for immigrant families. Isabella ran it with the same fierce efficiency she'd once applied to translation work, finding purpose in helping others navigate the system that had been so difficult for their grandfather. And Valentina grew. She smiled at 6 weeks, laughed at 3 months, reached for her father's face with tiny hands that would someday build something even better than what they'd created. On a cold February morning, exactly 1 year after the accident that changed everything, Evelyn stood in the garden holding Valentina, now nearly 3 months old and bright-eyed with curiosity about the world. 1 year ago today, Lorenzo said, coming to stand beside them. I was driving home from a meeting, cursing the weather and thinking about how much I hated my life. And now? Now I can't imagine wanting anything different. He took Valentina from her arms, lifting the baby high enough to make her squeal with delight. This right here, you two, this life we've built, it's everything I didn't know I needed. Evelyn thought about the woman she'd been that day, heartbroken and desperate, driving into a blizzard with nothing but $300 and a prayer. She'd thought her life was ending that night on the frozen highway. Instead, it had been beginning. I love you, she said, the words still new enough to feel precious. Both of you. This whole impossible life. Lorenzo kissed her. Valentina held carefully between them, the three of them a unit that nothing could break. In the distance, the mountains rose snow-covered and beautiful against a clear blue sky. The same mountains where Evelyn had nearly died. The same landscape that had seemed so hostile and unforgiving. But perspective changed everything. What had looked like an ending had been a beginning. What had felt like death had been rebirth. And the man who'd pulled her from the snow had given her something more valuable than rescue. He'd given her a home, a family, a future bright enough to outshine every dark moment that had come before. Valentina reached for her mother's face with chubby fingers, and Evelyn caught her hand, pressing a kiss to the tiny palm. Thank you, she whispered to her daughter, for giving me a reason to survive. But as Lorenzo's arm came around her shoulders and Valentina giggled in the cold morning air, Evelyn realized she had it backward. She hadn't survived for Valentina. She'd survived to become the woman who could build this life, the woman strong enough to choose love over safety, who could stand beside a complicated man and help him become better, who could take wreckage and transform it into something beautiful. The blizzard hadn't destroyed her. It had forged her into exactly who she needed to be. And from that frozen moment of despair surrounded by snow and darkness and the certainty of death, a new life had emerged, stronger, fiercer, and filled with a love she'd never known was possible. The accident had broken everything. But from those broken pieces, they'd built something that would last generations. A legacy not of violence, but of redemption. Not of fear, but of hope. Not of what was taken, but of what they'd chosen to create together. And as they stood in the garden, Lorenzo, Evelyn, and Valentina, the February sun breaking through winter clouds to warm their faces, the past finally released its hold, and the future opened wide before them, full of promise and possibility and the kind of fierce joy that only comes from surviving the impossible.